Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this, our first session in our autumn series of public seminars on mobility. Where is Asia going? We are very happy to welcome all of our visitors here. This program does do double duty as a Stanford class as well. I'm Richard Dasher. I direct the U.S. Asia Technology Management Center at Stanford, and we've been putting on this autumn series with a different topic every year since 1992. So this is our 28th year of doing these. We're quite happy to welcome everyone. I'm going to give the overview presentation today. There's a lot to talk about when you're talking about mobility. So if you do have questions, something is unclear, feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, let me recommend that you put your questions into the chat window, and we'll deal with the questions after I get through with the main part of the presentation. So this is available for university credit to students who are registered Stanford students. There are 3 departments that list the course. It's 1 unit, pass no credit. And we do have our own kind of requirement for getting credit for the course. What we ask is for a brief comment about each session in the series that shows that you've watched the session. You don't have to completely describe the entire session. You also don't have to give any kind of really deep analysis, but just something that you say that lets us know you actually watched it. So if I just see something that looked like the speaker slides that you skimmed through, I'm probably not going to credit the comment, and I'll ask you to rewrite it. Comments are due, 1 comment for each session within 2 weeks of the date of the session, except for the very last session. That's due 8 days after the session is over on December the 10th. That's so I can get in the grades on time. This is, if you haven't figured this out yet, we need for you to register for the series in advance. And this would apply if you happen to be seeing the video of this session on YouTube. So please do register in advance. The official class time starts now and will last until 7 o'clock. It is being recorded, so anything you say may go out onto the internet. And after we reach 7 o'clock, if you're still interested in discussing the topic a little bit, I'll stay around for an informal conversation that will be off the record and not recorded. So please feel free to stay for a little bit longer if you can. So today's talk, first of all, understanding what I mean by calling this, industrial revolution time. Then we'll talk about Asian innovations and mobility, which really fall into 2 big categories. The first is new ways of getting around, moving people around and moving things around. And the second category is new things to do with mobile devices. So we'll end up with a teaser about some of the subsequent sessions that are coming up in the series that I think is going to be a great series of speakers, separate from today. So we're in the middle of 2 industrial revolutions. We're really in a time period that is very similar to what the world went through about 140 years ago until about 100 years ago. And the first industrial revolution that everybody talks about is with mechanization. But there was another huge wave of change that happened from the mid-1800s as people found new ways of using the machines. Assembly lines became the way to do mass manufacturing. There were more specialized jobs in the economy. Huge numbers of people flocked to the cities. So this second industrial revolution was really new ways of using what had been developed in the first. Ever since about World War II, digital data has started to spread to every part of our lives. And that really, I think, the spread of digital data is the characteristic of the third industrial revolution. There are several different ways in which we had connected IT. Um, the old days of mainframes and terminals where one system could not talk to another. Then we had, with the growth of internet protocol, we had the client server environment. And really since about 2005, we've been in the era of the cloud. So that's one big thing that's going on. But as that's going on, people have developed new tools to use, new tools to analyze data, to use data in order to automate things. And that's really another huge revolution that has started much more recently. It's really started around 2010. Now, people talk about Industry 4.0. You'll hear people talking about Society 5.0. The point of an industrial revolution, though, is that it's an era of huge change. So how much have things changed? Look at how much data is all around us right now. A zettabyte, and there were about 2 zettabytes of data created in the year 2010, the beginning of the zettabyte era, is 1 billion terabytes. So one person from China explained this to me by saying that if 1 gigabyte is the size of a brick, 1 zettabyte would be the size of the entire Great Wall of China. Not just the part you can walk on near Beijing, but the entire Great Wall of China. And so we're in the process of going from an era of 2 zettabytes in 2010 to over 181 zettabytes that are projected to be created by 2025. What are people doing with all this data? Now, I'm getting ahead of myself because these are actually mobile application categories. This year, this company that does an internet report every year decided to focus their entire report on mobile internet phenomena. So what people are doing with their kind of, the applications that are taking up all of the data that is out there, video streaming. And sure enough, there's more video data on the internet now than there is text data. That's been the true since about 2015 or 2016. Social networking, browsing the web, messaging, gaming, e-commerce, file sharing, cloud services. And this actually hides a lot because this is people to the cloud, either downloading or uploading. Inside a data center, data is being moved around in huge quantities all the time, because whenever you analyze data, it's typically all the data you're analyzing is being taken from multiple servers it's stored on and put into a database where it can be accessed for analysis. Now, there are streaming approaches to this and so forth, but if you really look at cloud, there's an awful lot that people don't see, but this is what people see. Virtual private networks and security, and audio is down there at the bottom. Audio doesn't take nearly as much data as video does. So the fourth industrial revolution, this is kind of astounding and may almost seem unbelievable, but KPMG did a survey of 950, quote, business decision makers. So I assume these are people at VP level and above, and also government IT decision makers, 150 people per industry sector. And 93% of people in industrial manufacturing, and remember that covers everything from automobiles to computers to washing machines, say that their organization is using AI in at least a moderately functional way. 84% of financial services, and on down, even 61% of government. Now, there's something in this that you should notice, and that is that you see a lot of data out on the internet, and you really don't know whether people were paying attention to global reach and differences in region to region or not. That's one of the things we want to address in this seminar series, But for now, suffice it to say that KPMG was probably looking at the US and maybe a few MNCs that are based in Europe too. They probably weren't even looking at Asia. But in any case, AI is the classic new tool for the fourth industrial revolution. It's along with blockchain, along with quantum computing, which is coming up, along with edge computing, which is a new architecture for doing information processing, are really the new tools that are in the process of giving us this huge wave. So yeah, we're in the middle of both. This is an earlier version from a different source, just so you could see this back in 2019. The important column here is the right-hand column. Industry by industry, they went around and asked people how many of their companies were using at least one AI program in their operations. 76% of people in the automotive industry, 72% of people in the telecom industry. Remember, this was a year before the survey by KPMG, but it also shows a great deal of adoption. So what happens in an industrial revolution? It's a revolution. And that means that the old order is being replaced by a new order. That process is often called digital transformation. But new ways of doing things in industry are becoming mainstream. New lifestyles are becoming the norm. People who are on the side of change may lose things if they take a bad risk, but they, on average, tend to increase in wealth. They tend to do very well. And it's the people who are left behind that may cause social problems. This led to 2 world wars the last time around, between 1880 and 1950. And hopefully we won't see that again, but that's something that we need to be concerned about, and is not really so much about Asia, but it's something that is a very big point. So if a company wants to survive, they have to use digital technologies, not only to adopt them, but to transform themselves. They're undergoing fundamental changes that match what they know about their customers, what they know about their suppliers, what they know about their competitors, and also the increased knowledge that their business parties, these other business parties, have. So mobile is one of the biggest aspects of this digital revolution. It has enabled us to do so many different things without having to go to the office, without having to be stuck in one place. And probably 2 biggest inventions that we've had that feed into this, the smartphone, and also the automobile was invented a lot earlier, but the spread of digital technologies to the automobile has been huge. So I think that in category 1 of this sort of great change that we're going through, moving people and moving things around, the first big trend that we see is the shift from gasoline power to electric vehicles. That could not happen without good software for battery management. So even in something that looks as not clearly an internet app or something, you see the role of digital technologies. Connected car is a big area of change, especially because it's really evolving into this whole thing about smart cities, where digital communications are enabling mobile platforms to interact with infrastructure in a way that they never could before. Autonomous vehicles and drones, okay, based control, remote control. This is all going to be digital IT. New propulsion systems are on the horizon, fuel cells, hydrogen power. I think that you're seeing innovation in areas other than digital technologies. And this is a good example. You're seeing new materials development, you're seeing new work in energy, new types of materials. We're going to focus more on the platforms this time. And finally, logistics management is now AI enabled, managed from the cloud. as we'll see in a week or so. So that's category one. Even things that you might not think of as being digital technology really involve digital technology. And category two is doing things with smart mobile devices. This is, of course, all about your smartphone. So we'll come back to that later in the session. To move on to what's happening with global mobile access, to show how big mobility is part of this industrial revolution, this industrial revolution, look at how much telephones have been used to access the internet from the year 2011 until 2021. This is a percentage of all website traffic. And it probably includes access by apps as well as access by browsers. But it really didn't start until after 2011. What was happening? The iPhone was first introduced in 2007, but it was the iPhone CDMA that was a world standard for rapid internet exchange by mobile platforms, rapid data exchange by mobile platforms that did it. The first Android smartphone came up in 2008, all around this time. And then you had this incredible steady increase to 2017. And it seems to have become rather stable since then. We'll see what will happen. I think that in realizing that mobile phone access of website traffic may be missing automated accesses that are coming in along with IoT. So it may be that just the total number of accesses is the roof. The number of smartphone subscriptions worldwide has reached about 6.3 billion subscriptions. Now that corresponds to about 4.3 billion people in a couple of years anyway. And there is a difference. The digital haves, the digital have-nots. In advanced economies, about 76% of adults tend to have a smartphone, whereas that number is more like 45% in emerging economies. When you get more detailed into what's going on with Asia, you see something very interesting. This is mobile internet traffic in selected Asian countries, where the two highest are India and China, that you would not expect to be in the developed country category. You would expect fewer people to have smartphones. But I think that what you're seeing is areas in which these are the first way and the only way that many people have accessed the internet. The other thing that depresses this percentage in more advanced economies is because people are still using desktop computers a lot. In a lot of places, may be even less desktop computing. With regard to Vietnam being that much lower than everybody else in this chart, I wonder if that's because of the popularity of internet cafes. People are not carrying around their smartphones that much. There are different business models with smartphones. Even in Thailand, where usage is quite high, a lot of people in the country are still using prepaid minutes. They go to a kiosk and top off their prepaid minutes. They don't have a subscription. So you're seeing people taking a lot of trouble to use various things. They must be pretty useful. But yes, China and India definitely show up as remarkably higher than the world average, and the US average is even lower. One of the other interesting things about what's happening in Asia is just mobile internet speeds are incredibly fast in some places like South Korea. Now, the number one country in the world for the fastest internet speed is United Arab Emirates. And several of the Gulf countries have very fast internet speeds. But you're seeing, okay, this is kind of, you can deal with this, although when I'm in a lot of video conferences with India, I do recognize that sometimes the internet speeds are sort of slow. It's remarkable that so much internet is being used with mobile phones in India when the speed is so slow. I'd also point out that this is the speed of actually what you get on your cell phone, not if your smartphone is hooked up to a Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is still considered fixed location, although in 5G, that distinction is going to disappear. So for now, this kind of speed is really what you get when you're out using your mobile data. So how are people using this? This is the first big point that I want to talk about today, moving people and things around. The first big shift is the shift from gasoline-powered cars to electric vehicles. So by far, the Northern Europeans are outstripping everybody else in the world. New car sales, 74.8% of new car sales in Norway last year were electric vehicles. So the world average 4.6. China was the one country in Asia that had a higher rate than the world. The US was 2% of all new vehicle sales were electric vehicles, and it goes on down so that India was 0.1%, Indonesia was 0.1%. Of all of the vehicles in stock, China now accounts for 44% of all of the electric vehicles that are out on the road. And this represents a 36% year-on-year increase during the years 2016 to 2020. The US has 17% of all the EVs, and that represents a 17% year-on-year increase. But the EU, 60% every year growth in the number of electric vehicles on the road. So this shift is happening in Asia as well as in the US, and China seems especially active. The charging stations for EVs. Similarly, China has made major inroads into this. Private chargers are big in the United States. Most everybody is charging in their own garage. In highly dense cities, your car may not have that kind of, you may not have a garage for your car. So there's more public charging in places like China, although I was kind of surprised to find that in Japan, there were still 3% of the people in Japan were actually charging their cars at their houses. I was a little surprised to find that because in most places like downtown Tokyo, houses don't come with places where you can charge your car. Anyway, China has 37% of the personal charging stations, 52% of the old-fashioned slow charging stations, and 82% of the fast charging publicly available stations in the entire world. A lot of this has to do with massive rollout by Tesla in China, but it also has to do with the fact that these fast charging stations are much smaller total set than the number of private stations that are available. But China has really moved on to really push for electric vehicles. And if you look at what's on the horizon, countries are already looking beyond the regular old battery-powered electric vehicle to hydrogen-powered fuel cell vehicles or fuel cell electric vehicles. This is where hydrogen goes through a fuel cell and generates electricity, and the result is water. There is no carbon dioxide. It is absolutely, completely carbon neutral. China has been active in this. I thought this was a good newspaper headline that shows that Elon Musk said that fuel cell vehicles were a really stupid idea a couple of years ago and is pushing ahead with it. They had also started earlier. Ballard Systems, Canadian company, was providing fuel cell hybrid buses to these two cities in Guangdong province in China. The project was announced in 2015, and they did form a consortium with a local manufacturer. So the buses are made in China. The designs are localized for use in China, and China is taking the lead in developing the local charging stations to, put hydrogen into the vehicles. So by 2018, 16 of these buses were already in use, and another 40 were on the way to being used this year. But the most recent information I have is on this slide. Japan and Korea are also very actively involved in fuel cell hybrid cars. There are 3 fuel cell hybrids, hydrogen powered cars that are available in the United States. The Honda Clarity was actually the first. It's actually been in the US for at least 7 or 8 years. It's only available by lease. They started off with 3 charging stations in the Los Angeles area and only making it available in the Los Angeles area. One of the first people who got it was Julia Roberts. And then a couple of years later, Toyota came along and started selling the Mirai, which is a sedan. And 2020 was a really bad year for these fuel cell hybrid cars. The number went down from 1,500 sold in 2019 to almost 500 sold in 2020. The Hyundai Nexo is the first fuel cell hybrid SUV, and it came to market in 2018. It's now the world market leader. They've sold more than 10,000 of these in Korea, and Korea has quite a few charging stations, about 45 hydrogen charging stations the last I saw. US was down. In 2019, they sold 320 of these, and in 2020, they sold 208. So charging stations are still the big limitation. But China has announced plans to have 1 million fuel cell electric vehicles on the road by 2030. And in January this year, Hyundai announced, as was reported in the Financial Times, that it's going to build a big fuel cell factory for vehicles in Guangzhou. They expect to complete it by 2022. And at first, they'll make 6,500 units, enough for 6,500 vehicles a year, and they're planning to move up their capacity to 730,000. Hyundai also delivered their first production models of a big semi-trailer truck called the Exient last December. And this is also powered by fuel cells. So if you really want to see what's on the horizon about propulsion, though, I was fascinated to see that Toyota has developed not a fuel cell hydrogen engine, but a hydrogen combustion engine that they put into a racing car. And this car completed a 24-hour race in May this year. It did 358 laps, which is not nearly what the winning car did. It had to have 35 pit stops, which was about 1 pit stop for every 10 laps. And every time it had to go to a pit stop because of regulations of where they could keep the hydrogen around the racetrack, it had to leave the racetrack and go to the paddock. So a pit stop for this car took a lot longer than it did for anything else. But probably the most amazing thing about this is the racing driver was the president of Toyota, Akio Toyoda himself, who was racing under the nom de guerre of Morizo. So I'm not sure where this is going, but people are still having fun with cars. The connected car really has almost kind of disappeared from most discussions. And one reason is because when people started talking about connected car, they were talking about high-speed networks and location-based services. You approach a restaurant in your car and the restaurant will send a coupon out that comes to your cell phone because it knows you're in the neighborhood. That has not taken off. And so you're really not hearing too much about connected car services these days. What's happened is they've kind of been folded into smart city projects. And one of the big aspects of smart cities is kind of a holistic approach to mobility for everyone, people with disabilities, as well as people going to work, as well as people going shopping, and so forth. Worldwide, there are over 443 smart city projects in 298 locations. Um, One that we will feature in this series in November is the Woven Planet project that Toyota has spun out. This is being watched by a lot of people. Toyota put a lot of money behind it, and well, okay, Toyota's Toyota. There are at least 10 cities in Southeast Asia that have smart city projects, the ones you would expect, but also New Clark City, which is where the old Clark Air Force Base used to be in the Philippines. The Korean government has made Smart City a big government initiative. There is a kind of unified Smart City Korea portal on the internet that really pushes a lot of government policy and interests, as well as a major project in the Songdo part of Incheon. So these smart cities are typically involve combinations of advanced mobile communications, true 5G networks, IoT networks of lots of sensors so that the car is really interacting with its environment in ways the driver may never know, various kinds of location and positioning systems, and also applications like electronic payments and the analytics to not only manage traffic flow, but also to get the most value out of the infrastructure. A lot of these smart cities have announced that they will be starting autonomous vehicle test beds. And this is still where the autonomous vehicles are. There are not many of them running around on the road just anywhere they want to. Most places in Asia have set aside specific districts of cities for autonomous vehicles to be used in, either for test beds or for actual services. And in the smart city, you're going to be talking not only about autos and other kinds of shuttles, but about delivery robots and so forth. So this is kind of a natural transition to autonomous vehicles. And everybody talks about Waymo, but there are at least 6 major players in the autonomous vehicle space in China, and probably dozens of startup companies that have various enabling technologies. So AutoX, which is a Hong Kong company, started a robo-taxi service in Shanghai in April this year. And they just got permission to start testing their system in San Jose, California. AutoX is backed by Alibaba, MediaTek, the car maker Shanghai Auto, and also Dongfeng Motor. Baidu started their R&D way back in 2013. They have focused a lot on software, and the AI national interest statement by the Chinese government actually specifies Baidu as the national champion for autonomous vehicle software. They branded what they're doing Apollo from 2017, and they have a robo-taxi service in Hunan province that they're using 45 autonomous vehicles for. They have built a number of testing grounds, including the world's largest testing ground in Beijing. And my understanding is that they're interested in providing the operating system under license to other car developers. Didi Chuxing has a robo-taxi service that they started in June last year. Pony.ai, who we had in our seminars last fall, Dr. James Peng, who is the founding CEO of Pony.ai, was our speaker. His video is up. Now has 50 autonomous vehicles operating in Guangzhou. They got some investment money from Toyota. there's one long-term big truck autonomous vehicle play that's active in China. The company actually is headquartered in San Diego, but it's a Chinese, really a Chinese company where their operations are in China. The fifth automobile company is WeRide, which has a robo-taxi service in Guangzhou. And they're receiving some CVC, corporate venture capital, from the Nissan Renault. So here's what they look like. The top left is the WeRide vehicle in operation in Guangzhou. Here is Apollo going into the garage. Here is Didi Chuxing getting ready to probably give these people a ride in the robo-taxi. Here is Pony.ai, which this may be a picture in the US. I'm not sure. They're doing testing here. And here's the big truck from Too Simple. I couldn't figure out how to fit in AutoX on this slide. So apologies that they didn't get their picture. So other countries are, of course, active with autonomous vehicles too. The big news in Japan this year was that Honda has brought to the market what they claim to be the most advanced autonomous vehicle. It's built on the body of the Honda Legend, and they just took it to market in March 2021. It's only available for lease. It's not available for purchase, but it claims to be level 3, where level 1 is kind of not at all autonomous. Level 2 is driver assist. What Tesla has is generally considered to be between level 2 and level 3. Level 3 would be fully autonomous. Level 4 means that you really just get into the car and tell it where you want to go. And level 5 is when they don't even bother to have a driver interface. It doesn't even have a steering wheel. The other things that happened, Toyota had a shuttle bus that was used in the Tokyo Olympics that was a series of autonomous vehicles. They did have one accident, and that, of course, led to a lot of news in Japan. I was interested to find out that a non-automobile company, MEC, is providing autonomous vehicle technology for testing in the UK with partners there. And the other thing that we should remember about Japan, Komatsu came up with an autonomous hauling truck way back in 2009. Now, the difference between this autonomous hauling system and what we're thinking about is that this would not be used. This was used from the mouth of the mine to the closest railway station. And the tires on these vehicles are about 2.5 or 3 meters in diameter, so that it's a huge concern in absolutely horrible conditions, hot, dusty, really where people would much rather be inside a nice air conditioning room kind of controlling the system. And they tend to run in, in convoys up from the entrance of the mine to the railway system. But they've been doing that without a driver in each vehicle ever since 2009. Singapore had a robo-taxi project with a company that was later acquired by Delphi back in 2017. I don't know if it's still active. So if anybody in the audience knows whether this robo-taxi project is still going on, that'd be great if you would let us know in the Q&A session. South Korea has over 22 autonomous vehicle related startups. These either are developing the technologies for autonomous vehicles or something that fits into an autonomous vehicle ecosystem. Similarly, India has 20 autonomous vehicle related startups. And both of these numbers are as of this year. So Asia's moving ahead in this. There is a lot of interest in these advanced areas. To move on to the second type of mobility, doing new things with mobile devices, just jump right into it and talk about how big e-commerce is, especially mobile e-commerce. So they did a survey in Q3 of 2020. It was not necessarily the same month during that quarter in every economy, of how many people in the population had bought something with a mobile device in the last month. Almost 80% of the people in Indonesia had bought something with a mobile device. And remember, Indonesia did not have that great a mobile infrastructure. The access speeds, the internet speeds were pretty low. Same thing for Thailand. 74.2% of people had bought something with a mobile device in some month during that quarter. And it goes on down. All of these countries were ahead of the world average. And there were three in Asia, well, two in Asia and the US that were behind. Again, I wonder if this had something to do with the 2020 troubles that were in Hong Kong that may have just depressed all kinds of activities. And with Japan, I think that, yeah, this is just not kicked off like it has in other places. There are great applications for e-commerce. Mercari is one in Japan, but people are doing more with their desktops. So a lot of mobile e-commerce in Asia. The payment kind of systems in places like Japan, people are still preferring traditional payment systems. They're using credit cards more than anything else. PayPay is a mobile payment system, an app that is in Japan. And that was, no, that was not the one that was bought by PayPal. It was Payday that was bought by PayPal. But notice that e-commerce as a total percent of retail sales was only 10% in Japan in 2020, whereas it was over 40% of retail sales in China and 26% of retail sales in South Korea. So e-commerce is doing okay in Japan, but the payment systems are still pretty slow. Flip that around to India. And what you see in India is that Paytm is really incredibly heavily used. Which payments have you used offline and offline within the last month? 85% of the people in that survey said they'd used Paytm. And, you know, of course, this adds up to a lot more than 100% because people could use multiple payment approaches. But notice that the kind of mobile payments has moved quite a bit ahead in India. One of the reasons for China being where it is because WeChat Pay and Alipay are being used for almost everything. In fact, if you don't have WeChat Pay or Alipay and you visit China, life may be kind of inconvenient for you. I thought it was fascinating to see 550 million users of WeChat Pay, 650 million users of Alipay, and only 10 million users of PayPal. You know, this reflects incredibly high national adoption rates in China. A relatively moderate amount in India, higher than the United States, and Japan is kind of trailing the US, but maybe not by a whole lot. So we tend to be conservative. When you ask why, it could be that countries that had developed to an advanced degree have a harder time getting rid of their legacy ways of doing things than countries that are starting to closer from scratch. And that kind of delay of the next generation by the previous generation is something that all of us should watch out for and make a point of paying attention to what's going on outside the US. So in some countries, mobile was really the first means of accessing the internet. I mentioned about business models really being quite different. Telehealth may actually be more about reaching new markets than about improving quality of care. This spring, in our public seminars in April, we had a Stanford alum, Shihong Chen, who has worked heavily in telehealth, and he called in from Shanghai. And he, a lot of getting health services out to rural areas was behind this, behind telehealth in China. But people would really prefer to go in person because they feel like they can have better care. There were some stories about people who had traveled, 8 hours by taxi or by car, family car, I guess, to get to a big hospital in Shanghai instead of using an alternative local caregiver. So telehealth has still not won those people over. EdTech is in the middle of some regulatory confusion, especially in China, which has basically cracked down on all after-school education services. China, like Japan and Korea, work their kids to death in junior high and high school so that they can do well on college entrance exams. In addition to going to regular school, they typically go for several hours to an after-school educational institution that I think 70% of parents in Japan have their kids enrolled in these juku, right? These after-school schools. So China cracked down on this, and so it's not clear what's happening. That whole area is heavily regulated, and not only the educational establishment, the regulators, but the big industry itself is probably not interested to see newcomers in use mobile apps for a lot of study. So what I'm seeing in Asia with educational technology are focusing on professional skills, people who want to learn how to do design thinking, or people who want to learn how to program in R, or people who want to learn how to speak better English in business. Those are areas in which I'm seeing quite a bit of growth in terms of getting things done with these Asian applications, mobility applications. So really, this kind of summarizes the points that I wanted to make today. We have some time for Q&A, but mobility is probably one of the biggest changes that history will see as having happened between about 1980 and 2050. It is one of the biggest aspects of the third and fourth industrial revolution, like the spread of electricity in the second industrial revolution. Asia is particularly active in exploiting opportunities in mobility. There were some specific problems. Asia's a very diverse place. Different languages, different political systems, different economies, different cultures. So there's not really much you can say Asia-wide except averages of very different systems. I think that in regard to the things that Asian people do, they look at the difficulties around them and they're finding problem solutions that involve mobile devices. So one of the things that we'll see later in the series is that even though ride hailing really took a hit during COVID-19, delivery services for food and other kind of delivery just went through the roof in Asia. Gojek and Grab were making a lot of money in that particular business, the delivery business. And to a certain extent, that reflects how bad the traffic is in big Asian cities as well. So local conditions will lead to kind of unique services that are highly localized. And it's really valuable for us not to try to take applications developed here and just tailor them for Asia, to look at what's going on in Asia and think about what opportunities there are that might intersect what we have so that we localize better. I do think that US-China tension is making exchange with China more difficult now. But it's basically not that hard to get information going on in Asia. The problem is you have to look. Like that early survey I talked about where I think it was KPMG surveyed a lot of people about their uses of artificial intelligence. There was no sense about what potential there might be for geographic variation in the answers that people have. So this series is going to be all about looking to see what's going on, finding out what is happening directly from people who will be calling in each week, almost all of them from Asia. So next week, we have Mr. Deepak Garg, who's the founder and CEO of Rivigo, which is an Indian unicorn company. It's already worth more than $1 billion. And they came up with a platform that enables a totally different approach to long distance trucking in India. It's kind of a relay system where the drivers stay closer to their home cities and different drivers will take the vehicle to different segments of the route. They've had great results in a country that has difficult infrastructure with speeding up deliveries and also keeping the drivers healthier and more productive. In 2 weeks, Mr. Degawa and Mr. Tanaka of the company called Tier 4, which is actually a lot of the software in the autonomous vehicles that are being done by a number of the different major companies, will be talking about open source strategy. Up until now, the automobile industry has been anything but open. If you buy a GM car, all of the software in that is absolutely only going to work in something in a GM framework. And it could never talk to a Toyota. It could never talk to another kind of car. This is an approach where maybe we'll finally have a platform kind of like Mac OS, and then different applications will be usable on different kinds of devices. It will be interesting to hear what they say about open source strategy in the automotive industry from Tokyo. Then from the 14th, on the 14th, Dr. Chan is coming in from Hong Kong to talk with us about his company, Mapsys. And this company does indoor mapping where you can't use GPS and navigation for visually impaired persons. And their goal is to integrate this with the GPS systems that are used outdoors in a smart city environment. Then on the 21st, Ms. Iyer, Madhu Shalini Iyer, who is now a VC, but previously she was the chief data officer of Gojek, is going to talk about how the VC industry is seeing perspectives into these Asia opportunities. I know that she was an investor in Zomato in India, which is a delivery service, and also a number of these other very hot Indian companies. And we'll continue through November with another set of speakers, most of whom coming in from Asia. And we'll end up on December the 2nd with Mr. Hans Tung, who is a very well-known venture capitalist with GGV. He's been on the Midas list more years than he's not on this list in terms of the 100 most successful VC partners in the world. So we're very happy that he's agreed to come and give his kind of overview to close out our series. So that's really my presentation for today. We have some time for Q&A. So first I see a note from Mr. Suzuki, who is with Denso in Japan. And if I can read it, I think we should discuss on EVs, not only automotive industry, but rather energy, environment, and politics. The CO2 is defined in combination. EVs and power is good. However, those in dirty energy companies make almost no sense. Of course, that's true. And this is a very complicated situation. If you're burning coal to make electricity that you will store in the battery of the electric vehicle, yeah, you're not really doing anything but just using that dirty energy again. But it's also important, something that hasn't been talked about EVs is the lurking recycling problem we're all going to have in a few years as all of these old lithium batteries, lithium ion batteries, really become an environmental problem. So there's a lot of that. We have to consider all of those things. I agree with you. For today, I wanted to give an overview and kind of really make a point that while we may not be hearing so much about the EVs in Asia, there's an awful lot of activity going on there. Manji-san, would you like to comment more on that? We have time. Would you like to say a few words?
Hi, hello, Richard.
Hi, thanks for coming
Yeah,
in.
long time no see. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your presentation. It's very impressive. And then, as you mentioned, it's very complex situation. So many people talk about EVs only, but then, yeah, as I mentioned, we should take so many issues into consideration. So it's very complex issue. And yeah, this is very nice course. So I will be very happy to share the information in Japan, especially in automotive industry, because Denso is a automotive supplier, and then I have so many information. It's not a secret. So many information to be shared. Yeah.
Great, look forward.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, you and I can talk offline on that, and that offer is hugely appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other kinds of questions from the floor. We were going to do this in chat, but we've got enough time.
Well, we do have one other one. How mobility.
Oh,
yes.
How will mobility affect carbon emission on the ICT sector? That's a good question. To a certain extent, it's related to the same problem in cars, right? How do you charge your cell phone? What are you using to charge your cell phone with? I think that energy production is part of the problem. Energy transmission is also part of the problem because there's so much energy loss in the process of getting it from the production plant to the place where it's actually used. But I think that what we're seeing is we haven't really seen the impact on the grid yet. There are not enough electric vehicles to really cause California to have brownouts. And probably something large like a vehicle will have a much bigger impact than a cell phone or a tablet or even a laptop computer. But yeah, this energy problem is kind of a separate problem. It is one that all devices face, and it's one that we face. And the modeling is incredibly difficult. How do you model the environmental impact of semiconductor manufacturing in order to talk about the the carbon footprint of ICT? A lot of that is so far removed from what we see on the surface that we don't think about it, and the models have not been done very well. I have to say this is crying out for a really good, thorough approach that would involve probably all sectors. You need the policy sector involved, but it needs to be done by specialists. It needs to be done by neutral people, not just industry. And we haven't really developed the infrastructure to deal with climate change. And, you know, the whole problem of carbon neutrality is a function of that. Thanks, Hesham. I appreciate that. Do you have further comments on that one? If you're still online.
I certainly.
Yeah.
This
please.
is not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough data to build the good models to do the right predictions for the energy consumption and carbon emission in the future. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Indeed, it is very difficult. And we have to be taking action even before we have the complete solution to the problem, even, right? We have to be trying to do things and not just wait until we understand it first. We may never understand it well enough. Thanks. Those are both good questions. When I think of things that I couldn't get to the flying car. I was going to have this page on whatever happened to, and one of the things that I'm curious about is the flying car. There's a project in Tokyo. If I can find the information, I'll bring it out to everybody. But flying cars, flying motorcycles, flying, you know, jetpacks for people is certainly a type of mobility. Here's a question from Prakash.
Actually, he raised his hand if you want to have him ask it.
Okay, I see it. Do you want to ask it, Prakash? Or I can read it out.
I think he wants you to read it.
Okay, so does being connected have to imply being surveilled? Can we get the benefits without the risks? This is another thing. So mobility is the focus this term, and it runs into all this on climate change and carbon neutrality, and it also runs into all of this about surveillance capitalism and whether the government really should have the right to see everything that we do. And this is one that's another extremely hot area. We've been putting band-aids on that problem. We have not come to a really systematic way of trying to deal with it. The GDPR in Europe was at least a good set of standards. They're intended to be, you know, more or less practical. California came up with the CCPA, which is basically based on the European GDPR. But then you have in China this TIPL standard that was just announced in July this year that essentially puts the government in a very much direct line of almost every data stream. So that makes, you know, that makes people outside China very uncomfortable. It is something where I don't know what's going to happen with this. The real companies that are having issues are the American companies that are trying to do business in China, because part of this law is that the Chinese courts will have extraterritorial jurisdiction over these companies outside of China as well. So yeah, this is another big mess, and it's something that requires a really good set of independent, neutral thinkers, as well as the people from big companies. So I was part of an Association of Pacific Rim University study of the digital economy about 3 years ago. And it was a 3-year-long study. We had a couple of conferences that we hosted, that we produced in Tokyo, and we did the last one at Stanford. And it was a really good working group of people that involved people from large companies, from startups, from academic institutions from all around the Pacific Rim, including China and Indonesia, which refused to go along with the rules about data localization that the TPP was arguing for at the time. And I think that things like that could have an impact, but we need to move back toward trying to get these sort of councils together. So wow, I'm getting a lot more. So Oishi-san says, as you mentioned, increasing the amount of the internet traffic, that's rapidly increasing. What do you think people should be moving from mobile to smart mobility in the future as the majority? I wonder if shopping in the car will increase. Yeah, this is fascinating. Way back 25 years ago, when I first started looking at this stuff, I wondered what was going to be the result, because at that time people had to go to the desktop. You had to go to the server. People were talking about what would be the server in the home. And I think that one of the things that's happened is that the smartphone has become kind of the mobile control unit, as well as the mobile communications unit, as well as the mobile knowledge access unit, as well as doing a lot of analytics now, and recommending things to you and so forth. It's been extremely convenient, and the cost of computing keeps going down, the cost of the speed of internet keeps going up. And so the smartphone is really probably going to continue its role as sort of your most personal connection to the whole world of the internet, the world of the cloud and everything else, which may mean that your smartphone is going to interact more with your car. And I don't know if we'll be doing more shopping from our cars, but certainly we will be making changes of plans while we're going somewhere and doing things that we weren't able to do before. Probably voice activation for GPS in the car is definitely going to improve a lot. So it will be interesting to see what we get in this. I have been looking to see if there's another device that could take over instead of the cell phone. And considering the computing power that you can put into a cell phone and the speed with which it can communicate, it's hard to see that on the horizon right now. But who knows what will happen in the future? Good question. Let me go ahead and ask a couple others. Noda-san says, the combination of mobility and mobile devices and the carbon-free, in addition to connected, and also have implications for energy management. Right. Okay. We believe that open innovation is useful in this situation where market forecasting is difficult due to the multiple rather than single factors, and that open innovation must be further promoted. What do you think about open innovation management? 100% agree. A large company can do a lot of study and will hire a consulting firm like McKinsey or somebody to do $1 million study for it. But the time it takes to learn how to deal with this rapidly changing world, if you try to accomplish everything inside your own company, is too long, it's too slow. So open innovation, where a large company will partner with somebody from a different industry, or will partner with a startup company, or will partner with a university to work on some fundamental technology problem, is definitely one of the biggest tools that we have for dealing with an industrial revolution. And I think that you see better performance from the companies that are moving forward with rapid adoption of things like AI. In almost all of those instances, those companies, especially in traditional industries, have partnered with AI companies probably before the AI company had a really stable product. A lot of the initial partnerships were probably proof of concept partnerships or even joint development projects. And so I think open innovation is definitely an incredibly important tool. Thank you for that, comment, let me talk about open innovation, which is one of my heavy topics. I'm getting a suggestion for a speaker. That's good. I will talk about that. I'll follow up with Suzuki-san. And yeah, thanks to everybody for the questions so far. Is there anything else? We have a few more minutes.
Professor Dasher, will you
Yes.
share the slides with us?
Yes. What we will do is we will post the slides on our website, asia.stanford.edu, probably within the next day or two.
Thank you very much.
And they will be downloadable. The video will also be there, and it will be something you can watch. We'll post the video to YouTube. It'll take a few more days for that, okay? Because we do have some Stanford restrictions that we have to go through to make sure we preserve student confidentiality. So yeah, but the video will be up too. Thanks, Hesham. Other comments or questions? Well, I've never been told that it's bad to say what you have to say and then stop. So I think that if there's no more questions, we can call an end to today. I will do this. We'll stop the recording, and after stopping the recording, I'll stay around for off the record conversation with anybody who would like to do that. So thanks everyone for coming today. Look forward to seeing you next week with Mr. Garg from Rivigo calling in from India. So we'll see you then.